and turn your microphones on when you do speak. I'd like to thank Holly Schletzbaum and with Catalyst for providing lunch. I'm not sure is that who provided lunch? Okay. Okay. I thought it was a different group, but thank you, Heidi. For lunch, it's greatly appreciated. Committee will go ahead and get started. Josh, would you mind giving us the information on the audit?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Josh Luthai, here to present an audit looking at the Angel Investor Tax Credit, or AITC, program. Team members on this audit were Matt Fahrenbrook and Noah Enders. Kristen Rottinghouse managed the audit. This was another audit required under KSA 46-1137. That is the statute that requires us to do the economic development incentive evaluations. Our main objective in this audit was to evaluate how the AITC program influenced investor and business behaviors. In other words, we looked at whether the program caused businesses and investors to do things they otherwise wouldn't have done. Investors who responded to our survey generally said the program caused them to invest more or sooner than they otherwise would have. And businesses that responded to our survey generally said the program helped them do more, like hire more people or offer more products. I'll go into the survey responses more in a bit, but first I do want to provide some background information about the program. The information I'll be discussing starts on page 4 of the report. The AITC program allows participating startup businesses to give investors a state income tax credit in exchange for their investments. Each year, the Department of Commerce has a certain amount of tax credits it can give to businesses. For example, under state law, Commerce was allowed to give businesses up to $6.5 million in tax credits in tax year 2023. Startup businesses apply to participate in the program. If Commerce approves a business to participate, it will also give that business some tax credits, generally a few $100,000 worth. Then, those businesses can offer those tax credits to investors in exchange for their investment. If an investor agrees to invest, they get a tax credit equal to up to 50% of their investment. Investors can then use that tax credit to reduce their state tax liability. Investors without Kansas tax liability can transfer or sell their credits to other individuals too. In terms of qualifying for the program, businesses need to be startup businesses. This generally means they need to be less than 5 years old, but bioscience businesses can be less than 10 years old. Businesses must also have had revenues of less than $5 million in the most recent tax year. Businesses have to do most of their business or production in Kansas, and some kinds of businesses don't qualify for the program. For example, businesses in the banking and construction industry don't qualify. For an investor to participate, they need to be what's called an accredited investor. That generally refers to someone who has a high annual income or high net worth. So we're talking about people who make more than $200,000 a year or have a net worth of more than $1 million. There are also some limits on how much in tax credits investors can get each year. Investors can only get up to $100,000 in tax credits per business they invest in and up to $350,000 in total. Shifting gears a little bit, if you'll join me on page 8, I'll talk a little bit about how the program has been used between 2015 and 2022. Figure 2 on page 8 summarizes how the program has been used. Between 2015 and 2022, investors invested about $102 million in participating startup businesses. In exchange, they got about $44 million in tax credits. That means investors sometimes accepted less than a 50% tax credit for their investments. And as the figure shows, the amounts invested varied from year to year. Of the credits they got, investors used about $29 million to reduce their tax liabilities, and that shows investors aren't claiming all the credits they get immediately. Figure 3 on page 9 shows where Kansas investments came from. Kansas investors invested almost $73 million through the program. As the figure shows, most of that investment came from Johnson County. Additionally, most counties didn't have investors who participated in the program. Figure 4 on page 10 shows where non-Kansas investment came from. You do not have to be from Kansas to participate in the program as an investor. You can be from out of state too. Non-Kansans invested almost $30 million through the program. Those investors were from 37 states and territories, and as the figure shows, most of the investment did come from Missouri. Finally, in terms of where the investment went, most went to businesses in Johnson County and to businesses in 4 industries. Figure 5 on page 11 shows the counties to which investment flowed. Only 8 counties had businesses that got investment through the program, and figure 6 on page 12 shows the industries to which that investment flowed to. Now, going back to the survey results I mentioned toward the start of the presentation, like I said, in this evaluation, we focused on how the AITC program influenced investor and business behaviors. We focused on this because it helps determine whether the program is meeting its goal. According to state law, the program's main goal is to encourage investment in Kansas startup businesses. This should help those businesses expand, which would in turn create jobs and wealth in the state. To evaluate how the program influenced investors and businesses, we surveyed individuals from those 2 groups. We use surveys because there's really no other feasible way to evaluate what would have happened or what somebody would have done in basically an alternate universe where this program hadn't existed. I'm going to talk about our investor survey first. We surveyed almost 1,100 investors who participated in the program between 2015 and 2022. 355, or about 33%, provided complete responses. As part of the survey, we asked investors how important various factors were to their decision to invest. Figure 7 on page 14 shows how investors responded. As that figure shows, investors said the AITC program was either very or extremely important about 2/3 of the time. So in general, the program was something investors said they considered. However, other factors, such as the quality of businesses' management teams, were more often important to investors. So while the program was generally influential, it wasn't the only thing investors considered. We also asked investors what they would have done if the program hadn't been available. Figure 8 on page 15 shows how they responded. As the figure shows, most investors, about 60%, said they would have invested less or later if the program hadn't been available. And almost 30% said they wouldn't have invested at all. Only 10% said they wouldn't have done anything differently. For our business survey, we surveyed 158 representatives of businesses that participated in the program between 2015 and 2022. 52, or about 33% again, provided complete responses. As part of the business survey, we asked businesses how important various sources of funding were. Figure 9 on page 16 shows how they responded. As the figure shows, AITC investment was most often very or extremely important to businesses. Other important sources of funding included personal funds or family and friends funds. Other sources of funding, like venture capital or loans, weren't generally identified as important that often. We also asked businesses what they would have done without the AITC program. Pages 16 and 17 summarize how businesses responded. In general, businesses said they wouldn't have been able to do as much without the program. For example, more than 50% of respondents said their businesses would have hired fewer employees. A few respondents also said the program was what caused their businesses to locate in Kansas. Only 6% said their businesses wouldn't have done anything differently. Our results suggest a few things. First, the program influences investors' investment decisions, but it's not the only thing they consider. Second, the program increases how much investors invest. This is consistent with the literature we reviewed, which found angel investor tax credit programs increase investment in startup businesses. And third, this investment helps businesses do more than they'd otherwise be able to do. I'd note both investor and business respondents generally agreed AITC programs help startups attract investment. In particular, some businesses told us Kansas's program provides Kansas businesses a unique selling point that helps them compete for limited capital. That said, while we think our survey results are informative, we can't generalize the results of our surveys to all investors and businesses. About 2/3 of the businesses and investors that participated in the program didn't respond to our survey, so we can't say what they think about the program's effects. Before I start wrapping things up, I'd like to highlight 2 other findings. These findings are on pages 18 and 19. First, we noted the program data we initially received from Commerce was incomplete and sometimes inaccurate. We worked with Commerce to correct the data and recommended Commerce develop processes to review the data and ensure it's accurate. Commerce agreed to implement these recommendations. Second, we reviewed whether Commerce had implemented a recommendation from a prior evaluation of the program. In 2020, we recommended Commerce monitor businesses that participated in the program to ensure they stay in Kansas for as long as is required by state law. In this evaluation, we determined Commerce had developed a process to monitor businesses. However, we think that process has some room for improvement. We don't think the process is currently efficient enough to allow program staff to review all businesses annually. We also found Commerce's process wasn't well documented. Commerce officials said they're taking steps to increase the process's efficiency and that they'll work to better document what they do. To wrap things up, I'd like to remind you all this isn't the first time we've looked at the AITC program. We also evaluated it back in 2020. In that evaluation, we compared how businesses that participated in the program performed relative to peers that didn't participate. We found participating businesses survived about as long as non-participating peers. But we also found participating businesses created fewer jobs on average than non-participating businesses. However, we couldn't determine why that happened. We suggested two possible explanations. Either the program has no effect on businesses, or it helps lower growth businesses that participate in the program perform more like higher growth businesses that don't participate. Our survey results in this audit suggest the AITC program influences investors and business behaviors. For investors who responded to the survey, the program generally increased how much they invested. And that increased investment, according to businesses, helped those businesses do more. That provides some limited evidence that the AITC program might be helping businesses perform better than they otherwise would. But we don't know if those businesses are typically quote-unquote lower growth businesses than businesses that don't participate in the program. So it's still somewhat unclear why we saw what we did in the prior evaluation. We also don't know what the effects of the program were on businesses that didn't respond to our survey. Our recommendations to Commerce and Commerce's response to those recommendations are on page 20. Commerce's response to the overall audit is on pages 21 and 22. And with that, I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Josh. Committee questions? Senator Thompson.
Thank you. Thanks for the report. Very good. So it sounds like, and I'm just trying to summarize this, get it clear in my head, it increases the investments in the businesses, you know, that accept the funds, but those businesses don't necessarily, these are not new startups per se, and it doesn't increase hiring in those businesses. Is that generally true? That's kind of what I'm reading here. In other words, it just gives them an infusion of money, but they're not necessarily hiring more employees as a result. And certainly it doesn't look like it's a bunch of new startups. These are existing businesses that are there, and then this operates for them. Is that correct?
So businesses are new to the extent that they are either less than 5 or 10 years old. Whether that is new in your mind, up to you all. But according to statute, they have to be relatively new to participate. In terms of what the funding lets them do, for the businesses that responded to our surveys, a little bit more than 50% said the program helped them hire more folks. So in some cases, at least according to the businesses, it does help them hire more individuals, but that doesn't necessarily happen all the time.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? Representative Francis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I see a lot in this audit about what they said they thought happened, but do we have any data on any outcomes, like how many employees they had when they first received it and what their increase in employment? I guess I'm trying to figure out what we get, what the state as a whole gets out of this. And then how many, I know on angel investments and things like that, there's probably a very high failure rate, but was anything done or ever looked at as far as failure rates and employees at the beginning of the process versus where they are currently? And I know it would vary also by the number of years they've been in business, but.
So in this evaluation, we didn't look at those things. In the prior 2020 evaluation, we did. In that evaluation, we looked at how long businesses survived, or rather whether they survived for 3 to 5 years as often as peers did. And we also looked at how many jobs they created. If I recall correctly, I think the startup businesses, based on the 2020 evaluation, created about 1 new job every 2 years. So if you put these results together, you can kind of start to paint a picture of what might be going on. But as you also noted, it's difficult, I think, to evaluate what happens with startups because they are relatively new, and who knows how long it's going to take them to really get going. Is that going to be 5, 10, 20 years later?
And so if I look at that prior audit, will I be able to figure out how much each job we created cost the state?
I do not believe you would be able to do that.
Thank you.
So that is a good question. And Chris, would you mind sending a copy of the previous audit to the committee for a refresher? Yes, thank you, Chris.
And just a reminder to the committee, we do have a question out to the Department of Commerce that we're waiting on a response on the angel investor program, all the participating companies and their change in employment.
Thank you. And I don't know if it'd be for research or for you guys to maybe put some numbers to it and give an approximate for how much it did cost for those jobs, how much investment money. I would also, so I was curious about that, the success of the businesses. And I know this is from an investor's perspective, but how many of the investors that used the credits were in Kansas versus out of state? Out of state Kansas taxpayers, correct?
Yes, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I can get them for you.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The investors from the out-of-state can transfer their tax credits, and so they probably sold them to a Kansas taxpayer for a discount.
Okay, that would be another thing. Can we find out how many of those were transferred in the last few years? Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had discussions with some of the investors that take advantage of the angel investment tax credit, and quite a few of them say they would have made the investment even if the tax credit was there. Was that discussed at all in the audit?
Yes, based on our survey results on page 15, 10% said they wouldn't have done anything differently. That is, they would have invested the same amount in the same businesses.
Thank you for that. Sorry I missed it, but I'd venture to say that number's probably larger than 10%. Thanks.
Thank you. I would assume so, since they knew they were being audited on this program, they probably leaned toward keeping it in play. But any other questions, committee? Senator Ware.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think rather than nitpick, what we need to keep focused on here is the starting statement in bold on page 4 that says, most investors said the program caused them to invest more or sooner than they would have otherwise have, and most businesses said the program helped them to do more than they otherwise would have been able to do. And then on page 17, in bold, the investors and businesses who responded to our survey said that AITC programs helped startup businesses attract investment. There are always going to be a few instances where it didn't go according to the way we'd most like, but given the track record of investments, I don't see very much here besides success. Thank you.
Thank you. I would remind the committee that this is from the investor's perspective. Of course, it would be successful because of the tax credits. It's a different perspective from the business side. So we will have that at our fingertips again once it's forwarded. Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking on figure 7 on page 14. It's kind of interesting that the fourth and not the first factor was the quality of the business plan. I think understanding whether or not these businesses, where this money just strings them along, whether or not they have a business plan that's going to be sustainable for beyond 5 years is important for us to know. Whether or not we're just prolonging an eventual failure or what. So I think looking into data like that would help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Josh, you made a statement when you were going over your conclusions. I don't know if you have those at your fingerprints or fingertips again. Would you mind stating what basically the recommendation was that you had found?
The recommendation to,
Not the recommendation, it was right after right before the recommendation, you had made a statement that something that the department needed to do.
with regard to what Commerce needed to do, so we had recommended, one, that they improve some processes to make sure their data is complete and accurate, and two, we recommended that they increase the efficiency of their follow-up monitoring process and document it better.
So would that comment have to do with the web page that's supposed to be available on these investments, or did you look at that?
We did not look at that as part of this audit.
Okay, okay. Any other questions or comments, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Josh. Would the department like to comment? No? Okay. Are there any questions for the department? Seeing none, okay, thank you. We'll move on to the security awareness training. Robert Murphy. Welcome back, and thank you for being flexible. In committee, I'm not to put him on the spot, but I've got to tell you, we've got one of the best IT guys in the, well, I would say he's very knowledgeable and extremely competent at his job. The state's lucky to have him, so thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate the kind words, and I hope everybody is doing well this morning. We are going to do the security and awareness training. This is an ITEC requirement, ITEC 7230 Alpha. It's going to cover all the issues that are required by the state. As such, it is a very basic training. It's going to cover all of your basic password requirements, data privacy, and all those topics. Going around the room, we've got a cybersecurity best practices sheet. What's that? I can't hear. Hold on. Excuse me. And then cybersecurity best practices sheet and a copy of the legislature's acceptable use policy. You guys can hang on to those. Again, very basic stuff. So let's get it kicked off. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Murphy. I'm the security engineer here at ks. I spent 8 years in the Army doing communications and information security. I have a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and a master's degree in cybercrime and digital investigations. Our agenda for today, we're going to go over passwords, privacy and data handling, and physical security, as well as common attack vectors, social engineering, phishing, malware, ransomware, reporting suspicious activity and abuse, and a brief overview of that acceptable use policy I provided. Let's start off with passwords. I've got a nice little chart right here. As you can see, it's going to show you how long it would take an attacker to brute force attack your password, meaning they just try and try again over and over again before they can guess it. Our state complexity requirements are a minimum of 14 characters with numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols. So as you can see, the state requirements, it would take about 16 million years for a brute force attack to guess your password. Just for your personal information if you use a lowercase letter or uppercase and lowercase letter password and other things, and you're at around 8 characters, which is most websites' requirements. You're looking at only about 2 minutes for them to brute force that password. So that's going to be quick and simple. They use something called a rainbow table, which is essentially a big list of all the known passwords that are common. They run it through their algorithm, and that's going to just pop out that password for them very quickly. So that's one of the reasons why the state of Kansas and why we at KLOIS encourage you guys to keep those longer passwords, and we're going to keep those in play. Some more general guidelines when we're discussing the passwords. Do not save your password to your computer where others may see it or write it down, or share it in person or via electronic means. We run into this a lot going from ticket to ticket. We'll see a lot of passwords written down on sticky notes or notebooks or anywhere where it's easily accessible. We don't want to do that. You never know who's going to be in your office and when they're going to go into your office. There's always a chance someone's going to walk in when you're not there. Whether that be a member of the cleaning crew, a member of the public, whatever it may be. The offices are secured when nobody's there, but that doesn't mean, during the day, somebody might not be paying attention. So we just want to make sure those materials are not anywhere in plain view. So the password must contain uppercase, lowercase, numeric, non-alphanumeric characters. In that, you don't want to include your user IDs, first names, last names, or any personally identifiable information. When I say that, I mean you don't want to use your grandchildren's names, children's names, street addresses, last 4 of your social security number, anything that could be found about you on social media or on websites, anything like that. You want to keep that out of your password because that's going to be something that is used against you in an attack. You also don't want to include context-specific words. So, for example, if you were to set your password as legislative session 2024, that would be context-specific, or set your Google password to Google. You don't want to do things like that, or Google 2024 or whatever it may be. Don't use in sequence or repeating numbers or characters. Don't reuse your passwords from your personal accounts like Gmail or Facebook. It's easy to reuse a password, but essentially if that password's found out once, what an attacker's going to do is they're going to take your name and your email address. They're going to go to every single site they can, Facebook, Google, TikTok, Twitter. They're going to put in that email address and that password they already have, and they're going to see how many sites they can get into. So you also want to use a unique password. That way they can't do that because you're opening yourself up to a ton of attack vectors when you reuse those passwords. And then finally, your password, when you reset it, has to be different from the previous 24 passwords that you've used. Again, this is kind of a way to make sure that, once somebody gets a hold of your password, because honestly, it's going to happen. This stuff's on the dark web. If you've ever run a dark web search for your information or your passwords, you can find it all out there. And it's at this point in time with data privacy the way it is on the internet in general, it's just really impossible to keep it off. So you don't want to be reusing those things. You don't want to be doing things that make passwords easy. If you can download an app or, on your iPhone or Android, that will allow you to create a randomized password for you. Those are great tools. As long as that's also secure. Something like Bitwarden is something that's really good, or the iPhone password manager or the Android password manager. Those are all really secure. And good ways where you only have to remember one password to store all your other passwords. I'm going to go over some bad password examples real quick here. So as you can see, the first one is all lowercase letters, and it's just my name and where I work. Going over what that is, that's the user ID, first name, last name, context specific, and it's missing some of the requirements, such as uppercase letters, numerals, and non-alphanumeric characters. Next one is I was born in 1984. That does have a lot more of the complexity as far as numbers, symbols, capital letters, but it's got my date of birth in it, and I use some repeating characters and numbers in there as far as the exclamation points. Next one is Bob Murphy 5555. That's not the last 4 of my social security number, but for purposes I put it up there because this is a pretty common one. People will do first, last name, and then date of birth or social security number, a really easy one to guess. Context specific, as I kind of mentioned earlier, Legislature 2024, although that does meet all the complexity requirements. It's, again, going to be one of those first guesses, and we've also got some repeating characters in there. And kind of an example of what some people will do to randomize is they will they'll go across the top row of the keyboard, hit the shift key, go across the next row, and then go across the third row. That's really common too, and those are really easy ones to guess. Everyone says, well, it's 20 characters, and I ran it across the top, and it's so random, nobody's going to guess it. People have been doing that for a long time, so those are easily guessable passwords. And that's kind of where you get into that 1, 2, 3, 4, QQQQ, 7777. So you just want to avoid anything like that. Some good password examples. So they're just random phrases, gummy bears taste purple. It doesn't mean anything, but it's got a lot of the different combinations. It's got blank spaces in there between the words, and it meets all the requirements, and there's, it's nonsense, but it's easy to remember nonsense because, it's quick and it's not witty, but, maybe it makes you chuckle. That's a good one. Passphrases that kind of make you chuckle, or if you have a saying that you really like, that's not super long, of course, you can use that as your password. Another example is red couches are tacky, and then what goes up must come down. Things like that kind of cover things that are going to be good passwords, very hard to guess, and won't show up on your most used password lists when you create things like that. Next, we're going to talk about privacy and data handling. These are the privacy and data handling definitions as provided by the state of Kansas and ITech policy. So first, and this is how you're going to kind of classify all the data that you work with. First, you have public data, which is classified when its unauthorized disclosure, alteration, or destruction would result in little to no harm or risk to the organization or the citizens of Kansas, the organization being the legislature. Private, which is data which is classified, data which unauthorized disclosure, alteration, or destruction could result in a moderate level of harm or risk to the organization of the citizens of Kansas. And then you have restricted data, which is data when its unauthorized disclosure, alteration, or destruction could cause serious or catastrophic harm or risk to the organization and the citizens of Kansas, which requires the most restrictive security controls. So, you will receive, according to what I've been told in the legislature, if you receive any constituent data, that is considered restricted use. So if you receive that via email, anything like that, you want to treat that as securely as possible. Don't share it. Don't save it. Don't save it to your desktop unless you're saving it into a secured folder. Everything like that, because we don't want to take a chance that information is going to get out. The other one we see a lot and that we want to discourage is phone rosters, especially phone rosters with personal cell phones on them. We see them displayed in offices a lot when we go around. We want those to be taken down because, again, you're going to have members of the public, lobbyists, all sorts of people in your office. And, while your office phones are public information and listed on the website, your mobile phones may not be. And it takes about 1 second for somebody to snap a quick picture of that phone roster, and then they have your mobile phone number in addition to your regular phone. And then, you can start getting the spam calls, texts, whatever that may be. So if you do have a phone roster up, we really encourage you to put that into a secure drawer. At some place where it's still easily accessible but not viewable by somebody who just happens to be walking by or walks into your office. So when we're talking about the privacy and data handling specifically, we want to observe the applicable policies regarding data handling, which can be found in ITech 7230 Alpha, 8000-P, 8010-P, 8010-A, and 8010-B. These are going to cover all of the privacy and data handling classifications for the state of Kansas. Some quick notes on that. You want to properly classify your information. There's a great matrix tool available on the KISA website, which will ask you a series of questions and kind of give you the exact guidance on how to classify that data. So if you have any questions about, well, what is this? Is this public, private, or restricted data? You can go to the KISA website, and I can provide a link for that after the committee meeting. And you can just enter your information, answer those questions, and it will give you a recommendation based on the state guidelines. So you don't want to access restricted or private information without permission. Seems pretty obvious, but if you are for some reason in possession of somebody's computer or have access to somebody else's calendar or emails, you want to stay away from that restricted or private information. That goes along with respecting data privacy. You want to keep restricted or private information in the applicable workspace. So that means don't take restricted or private information home. You know, again, it's not intentionally, you know, it's intentional or unintentional, and you don't intentionally mean for something to happen. But if you leave that computer in your car, or that paperwork in your car, or, you know, someone picks up and decides to use it, you can unknowingly cause some kind of data leak or breach. So we want to keep that in the applicable workspace. Do not discuss or display restricted or private information in the open. Store restricted or private information in a locked drawer in a locked room. Don't store it on personal electronic devices. This is another big one. You know, when you're storing official government data on your electronic device, you kind of open yourself up to different things happening as far as like subpoenas or information. If somebody needs something or there's some kind of legal issue, you know, I mean, there's been some pretty public cases. You know, I think the closest one is Hillary Clinton and her personal emails. You know, you want to avoid that kind of situation where you have that information on your personal email accounts, your personal phones, things like that. You know, they can subpoena you for that information if something does happen or that may happen. So best practice is to kind of keep that separated, keep it on a separate hard drive, things like that, where if you need to give it up, you can just say, here's this single item, or here's my work computer. All the information you need is right here. Do not send restricted or private information over unencrypted mediums, and respect the privacy of the rights of copyright holders, and do not share data acquired illegally. So it does happen. There have been instances, just even this past legislative session, where we found people have downloaded pirated movies, music, whatever, on their state computers. So we want to avoid that at all costs. You know, it's copyright infringement. It's illegal, as well as against state of Kansas policy. So, you know, of course, we want to discourage that as much as possible. Then we also need to talk a little bit about record retention, which is very important. This comes to what records constitute official state business. So a lot of times, with everything being electronic now, these are gonna be on your computer. Maybe they're sent via email. Maybe even you may even get them via text. So it's very important that if they are official state records, that you follow the record retention schedules, which can be found at this website. Again, I'm going to make sure everybody gets a copy of all these links. You can also ask the Historical Society downstairs, and they can give you a really good brief on that, because they do handle a lot of that as well. Next, we're going to talk about physical security. Don't leave your keys, access badges, or sensitive documents laying around. Do not piggyback when entering the building. Everyone's badge should be scanned. This is another big one for me. I know it's really tough for me not to hold the door open for people when I walk into a building, but we have the security scan for a reason. One, so we know who's in the building. If there's ever an incident, KHB has a rough idea of how many people we need to evacuate. And they also get information as far as your name. So if they have to do a roll call after an emergency or look for specific people, they know who is here. I know it's imperfect because we don't scan out, and I always get that question. Maybe they will change that, but at least they have a general idea. So, you know, even if you don't scan out and say, Senator Thompson, you've left the building, they can say, well, Senator Thompson was here this morning. I'm going to give him a call and make sure that he's okay. So that's why we want everybody to scan in and not just, you know, open the door for people. I shouldn't say you shouldn't open the door. You can't hold the door open. Just make sure you scan your badge on the way in. And then another one is to lock your workstation in every situation where it is not visible to you. Again, that goes to the point of it takes about a second for someone to click a photo with their phone. So if you leave your workstation unlocked and there's information on there, they can click it, and then they've got whatever that is. My idea for best practice is if you can't see your computer, lock it. So if you're going to be going somewhere where it's not visible, go ahead and lock that device. Going briefly into common attack vectors. These are some of the ways that we have seen, especially this increasing during the session in this past couple months, actually, that bad actors have been trying to get information from the legislator. So first, we'll talk about social engineering, which is using human interaction to obtain or compromise information about us, you personally. It takes advantage of fear, trust, insecurity, and lack of knowledge. The most common one you're going to see is phishing. This happens a lot via email, but it can also happen via text. It's the fraudulent practice of sending communications claiming to be from trusted sources to trick you into revealing personal information like your passwords, credit card numbers, or anything like that. It's the most common form of cybercrime, the #1 reason data breaches occur, and there's an estimated 3.4 billion phishing emails sent daily. And I can tell you that on a daily basis, there's an incident involving a phishing email that I have had to deal with ever since the session started. So it's a very common problem. It happens a lot. You'll kind of see on these best practices sheet real quick, the SLAM method, really simple kind of, acronym to help you remember. Verify the sender's email address, never click on any links, don't open attachments, and check the content of the message and keep an eye out for inconsistencies. Now, if you're expecting an email, of course, if Representative Williams is expecting an email from Senator Corson and she gets it, it's okay to click on a link or open an attachment. But if you receive something unexpectedly, you also want to verify. Contact the sender of the email. It takes a few seconds, and you can verify that they sent you the information and verify that the link is legitimate. So what gets delivered to your system and what the nasty things are when you get these phishing emails are going to be some kind of malware. It's either going to be a worm, a virus, or a Trojan. Essentially, a worm can move itself throughout the system without you doing anything. So if you download a worm and it gets onto your computer, it can jump itself to 5 other computers without you taking any further action as soon as it gets on your computer. A virus, on the other hand, would be something that when it gets on your computer, it stays on your computer unless you take an action to move it to another computer. And a Trojan is a piece of malware which appears as legitimate software but contains hidden malicious functionalities. Everyone's seen these. You've all seen on your phone or your computers. You'll be browsing the internet and you'll get a pop-up that says, 25 viruses detected on your computer. Click here and download antivirus software, or you can win $1 million if you download this app. Those are examples of Trojans that you see every day. And when you download that, it may not be ransomware, or it may not be something that's trying to steal your data, but it will pop up ads, it will be annoying, it will cause system degradation. So anytime you see anything like that, there's no, and I can tell you 100%, there's no legitimate piece of software or company that is going to get you to download anything via pop-up. If a pop-up ever tells you to download anything, get out of there, ignore it. Report it to us if you need any issue, or if you have any questions or issues. That's always going to be a negative. And that can lead to what is, obviously, as we've seen recently, a ransomware attack, which is a type of malware which can be delivered via any of those means that denies access to critical business data. Essentially, they're going to lock it out, and they're going to say, pay us this amount of money, and we'll give you your data back. The problem with that is they may have dropped something else in there that's sitting there waiting, so you pay them, and then 6 months later, your stuff's locked again, and you're paying the same person. So that's why we want to keep it out in the first place. It's a top malware threat, and ransomware's attacks against the government sector have risen continuously since 2018. Just a little under 2 years ago, Virginia was hit by a huge government-wide ransomware attack. They basically had to redo everything about their IT department, everything about their cybersecurity, everything, because they were just so, the attack was so widespread and they were so unprepared. So that's, a situation we definitely want to avoid here. So if you do see anything you think is suspicious activity or abuse of state resources, you can report that to the Kansas Information Security Office at 785-296-6069. Or the KISO does have the Kansas Information Security Office does have a web reporting link now for different things. You want to report that to your immediate supervisor. You can report it to myself, or you can report it to your IT staff downstairs, and we will get that taken care of for you. So in front of you, you have the acceptable use policy. This kind of goes over, this goes over your expectations when using government-owned equipment, whether that be laptops, tablets, anything like that, even the networks in the building, ks Open and ks.gov. The purpose is to establish a common and uniform policy for use of state-provided IT resources. We want to make sure that the resources are used in an ethical and lawful manner within the requirements of federal, state, and local law and any applicable policy. We want to maintain the integrity of these resources, maintain the privacy, confidentiality, and/or security of data contained within, respect to the network capacity, and we want to make sure that resources are used for official business only. So we do not want to give out or share our access privileges. This means our usernames and passwords. We do not want to attempt to get into anybody else's computer. You'd be surprised, it happens. We don't want to interfere with, compromise, or harm the performance, functionality, or integrity of IT resources. This is going to involve things like, and nobody likes to hear it, but if everybody goes to watch March Madness, when KU's playing, the network's probably going to crash. And that, in all honesty, it's not, the network we currently have is not built to handle that amount of traffic. So we want to avoid, doing things that aren't business related and streaming from our government computers. It also goes into not connecting personal devices to the .gov network. That .gov network is secure. It can be used to transmit restricted information. So we want to keep personal devices off of that network. That way we're not stressing that network out and everybody has a secure network. Any personal devices should be hooked up to KS Open. That is the public Wi-Fi network that doesn't handle any business data. It's just there for everybody to use. We also don't want to interfere with any state operations while we're using our computer, create an inappropriate atmosphere, generate costs for the state, or conduct external activities. Coming up, this is a big one, campaigning on legislative laptops, running your businesses, trading stocks, all those kind of things are against state essentially state policy for IT and everything like that, so we don't want to do any of that. Of course, we've already covered, do not download pirated material, do not utilize resources for commercial or financial gain, campaign, support partisan political candidates, or fundraise, represent yourself as someone else, or engage in any speech that would not be protected by the First Amendment. For us, our responsibilities are to make sure, we make sure that the equipment is maintained and that the network integrity is maintained. So as part of that, we have to let you know that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy on state-owned equipment. Now, your communications are your own, as is the law, but if there is a compromise, if your computer is compromised, we will have that device because we're going to need to figure out what's going on. We're not going to go through your data, but there's always a chance that we may see something, which is why we encourage you to only keep state business on the state computers. Nothing personal, because again, if we are under attack, if there's a ransomware attack, and it just so happens that it came in through your computer, we're gonna have to take that, we're gonna have to investigate, and if there's personal information on there, that becomes something that we're gonna have to access. Goes into any activity occurring on state-owned equipment may be monitored by the IT staff if deemed necessary. Again, this goes for audits, investigations, et cetera. We're not just gonna monitor any of the activity, but again, it might become necessary depending on, the situation. What may happen, a cybersecurity attack, a suspected attack, if we're trying to make sure that, for instance, we had a piece of malware downloaded to an OA's computer. If we had found that that malware had propagated to a couple or more computers, we would have had to start monitoring, computer traffic and things like that more heavily to make sure it wasn't moving around anywhere past that. So again, we just want to make sure that there's that separation of personal and state business on the state resources. So KLOIS will work with supporting legislative agencies, offices, and departments to establish, maintain, update, and enforce the acceptable use policy. Any violations will first be brought to the attention of the appropriate division IT staff or their director. And users who violate this policy, and this more applies to the employees, may be subject to disciplinary action from their respective director, including but not limited to demotion, suspension, or termination. I will say we have given this to the Speaker and the Senate President, and they wholeheartedly support the acceptable use policy and everything within it. So if there are violations, and it will go to my boss, and then then Tom, Mr. Day, and then it will go from there. I have no say in that whatsoever. But just so everyone is aware, this has been reviewed. We didn't just make this up and decide to put it out to everybody. We've had leadership in all the different departments and in the Senate and House review this as well. So at this time, that's the conclusion of, again, the security and awareness training, very basic. If you need any higher level training, or you'd like any higher level training, shoot me an email. I've got a ton of resources, or I can get with you one-on-one and we can do something. And I like to leave everybody with this: do not click on any links found in emails or answer any unsolicited requests for personal or organizational information. So again, verify, verify, verify. If you receive a link in an email, the best thing to do is to Google it. Take whatever that link was supposed to go to, Google that information and find it yourself. Same way if someone asks you for information via phone call, find a number for whoever's calling you, if it's your bank or if it's, you know, a family, purportedly a family member who sent you a text asking for money. Call them at their number that you know, call them at a trusted number that you know works before you give out any information whatsoever. Always do that. Lois will never ask you for any personally identifiable information, any password information, any username information via email or over the phone. Everything we do that has to do with security of your accounts or your email will be conducted in person. That's the new policy we started this year to avoid avoid having any of these phishing incidents happen. And the last very quick thing I'll leave you with is we see it a lot. The most common type of thing you're going to run into as far as phishing attack is what they kind of call a grandfather scheme now. It's essentially where you get a text from a family member saying that they are in jail or they need money because they don't have any food. Oh, just send it to my Cash App, send it to my Venmo. Again, verify. If you get a text, even if it's from a number from a family member you know, call that number, call somebody who knows them, ask the situation and verify before you send any money, send out any personal information. It's a great way just to make sure you don't fall victim to any of these schemes. So at this time, does anybody have any questions?
Absolutely. One is, have you guys sent the new policy out to legislators? This is the first I'm hearing of some of it, and I'm on JCIT.
Acceptable use policy?
Yeah.
So the delivery method is supposed to be in person, and we have been discussing times to get it delivered to everybody. We just have not been able to, so far, arrange a time
Yeah, those are major
to give the
changes
training.
that, need to be. Also, I would ask, a lot of people attach their phone to the network, too. So are you saying that that's unacceptable use of the network?
Correct. So that has been in the state policy for a while now. That's been in the ITEC
I don't
7230.
attach mine.
Oh, no, I'm not saying you do, Senator. I'm just saying that one has been in there for a while. It just hasn't been paid attention to or enforced. We have no way to really, I mean, it's putting our trust in you. We have no way to enforce that. We can't, OITS controls the network, so we can't see devices that are connected to it. It's just, again, it's been in the ITEC policy for quite some time that personal devices should not be connected to the secure government network. And we just wanted to make sure that we were starting to follow those policies because of what happened in the judicial branch and just because, Mr. Weiss has been focused on security for quite a while and, managed to bring me in. And now we're just kind of making sure, want to get everything locked down and working how it's supposed to, Senator.
Much appreciated. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Yep. Committee, I'll turn your attention to the consent calendar. Kristen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there is just one item on today's consent calendar. You can find it in tab A of your committee notebooks. So unlike most meetings, there are not minutes on today's consent calendar. It is just approval of the audit that Josh presented today on the Angel Investor Tax Credit Program. So unless there is objection from the committee, that item would be considered approved.
Committee, any objection? Seeing none, thank you. Committee will turn our attention to an update from Chris on bills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee bill passed out of the House with a slight amendment to review new economic development programs on a 2-year cycle. It is now moved on to the Senate. And, can you not hear me? Okay. That's the major bill. There was a bill to revamp the 911 system that also advanced. So those are the major ones that affect us. I did want to talk about the date of the next meeting. If you turn to tab B, where we don't have anything coming for you guys until late in March. I know that the first adjournment is scheduled for April 5th. Normally, the committee's selection of topics happens at the spring meeting, which in our rules is defined as the first meeting after first adjournment. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about possible dates.
Do you want to discuss dates? Committee, any suggestions? Seeing none, would you guys mind driving back in for another meeting? It looks like we're going to have to. Okay, so we'll plan on something over the April break. And committee, I also have another question I'd like to bring to your attention. I am requesting that Ford County and Chase County report to the committee on why they chose to take the actions that they did on the ballot audit, the election audit. Would you mind if we brought them in the next meeting? Okay, thank you. So no objection with that. Okay, committee, is there any other business to be brought before us? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.